Welcome, everyone. I'm Aliza Sherman, the CEO of Elementa. We are a global cannabis wellness network for women. We are growing very quickly. We now have presence in over 50 cities across North America. We are about to launch in Jamaica. So we're really excited about that. I see June going, oh, let's go there. Let's go there on our book tour, June. Right now, I just wanted you to see us. We'll try to bring video up again during Q&A, but most of this is going to be slide and the two of us having a conversation, really me asking June some questions, and then we'll get to your questions as well, as many as we can, and then we'll also try to answer some of the questions after in the next few weeks, send you some answers as well. Oh, we can't answer any personal questions, by the way, like just for you personally, anything medical, and I'll mention that again soon. So let's get into the slides. June and I are going to now depart from video at the moment. Okay, there we go. And here we go onto the technical part of this program. Fingers crossed, everyone. There we go. All right. And here we go. So first I wanted to let you know that this presentation, this February webinar, is brought to you not just by Elementa, but by Vibrant. And Vibrant is Planned Parenthood's online sexual wellness shop. It has over 500 body-safe adult products. All of the proceeds are going to support Planned Parenthood. And this amazing company run by a woman, Angela Wells, is dedicated to sexual health and pleasure for everyone. So let's level set here. we want to make sure you come away from this webinar empowered with better information about cannabis for not only your health and wellness, but the health and wellness of your loved ones as well. And we also wanted to introduce you briefly at the start to Elementa, to our wellness women's community, and let you know what we offer. I also wanted to just quickly remind you, please stick around. As Erica said earlier, we've got a stimulating gift from Vibrant for one lucky winner, plus some CBD tea from Giovanna. So make sure you stay with us for that. Now, here's a little bit about Elementa, just very briefly. We hold monthly events in cities across North America. And these, we call them more women's wellness circles. They're not like a typical cannabis event or a cannabis education event or panel or workshop or seminar that you might go to. These are more intimate and personal, where women can hear from one another, as well as meet cannabis experts and discover products, cannabis products. So we partner with brands who have quality products. Somebody on our team or within our circle has tried the products that we endorse. We also want to work with companies who have an ethos that is similar to ours, where we want to empower women. We want to lead with education. I mean, our mission is to put information into women's hands so they can take care of themselves, they can take care of their loved ones, and that they can cut through all the confusion, the misinformation, breaking that stigma. We also produce content to this end. So we have a website, we have regular email newsletters. We look for ways of developing content from a woman's point of view and for our lives as women. So there has been so much content out there just about cannabis or about CBD, which seems to be the hot topic right now, but not a lot of it is written specifically for a female audience and for our experience as women in our different life stages, from perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause. So there are things that we go through as women that are so different from what men go through. And so how do we use cannabis and CBD to address those? Well, that is what we write about. Now, I want to know a little bit more about you. So please take a moment. There should be a poll popping up on your screen. Can somebody confirm? Oh, there it is. I see it too. So have you tried cannabis for sex? I mean, let's just get out there. This is anonymous. Nobody's going to know. You can tell us, be honest. We'll give a few minutes for you, a few moments for you to click, yes, you've tried it. No, you haven't. Or if you want to give us a little information, no, but you're curious. Or no, and you don't really think it is for you, but you're here to learn for a friend, of course. So just a few more moments. If you would just click on your screen and let us know the answer. This can set the stage so we can see how many of you have actually tried it. And Erica, how are we doing? Are we getting some responses? Are people courageous enough to click?
Absolutely, absolutely. It looks like 63%. I'm going to share the results now. It's like 63 of you answered. And can you see?
I can see 59% said yes, you've tried it. And 38% are no, but you're curious. Well, good. Excellent. Because we're about to tell you all about it.
Fantastic.
So let's see. Now I mentioned Dr. Junella Chin, who was featured a moment ago in the video and is our special guest expert. So Dr. Chin, or June, as I now call her, but she is my co-author of this book that you see on your screen, Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness. We've written this book over the course of the last few months, and it's coming out in June. So we're very excited about it. And without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Junella Chin. And she's known as an integrative medical cannabis doctor. June, are you there now?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, ladies.
Hi, great. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, and how you got to doing what you do today.
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. So I was a patient before I became a physician. When I was 15, I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, or AS. It's an autoinflammatory disease of the spine that really causes your spine to ache from stiffness and nerve pains. And what actually happens to the spine is it begins to fuse, that you lose mobility and oftentimes rotational, the ability to rotate your neck or your back by the time you're in early 20s. So in my teenage years, I spent years cycling through conventional treatments. We, tried epidurals, of course, narcotics and muscle relaxants, and I did alternative therapy as well, ranging from acupuncture, from rolfing, different body work. And by the time I got to medical school, I was in San Francisco at the time, I was really having a hard time standing for long periods of time in the OR or doing rounds in the hospitals. And one of the attending physicians noticed my discomfort, Dr. Levine, and he had asked me about it. I told him I had AS, but that I couldn't take much medication because I'm a med student and I didn't want to feel groggy or foggy while working. And he handed me a tincture. He handed me a bottle of marijuana. And he said, this is marijuana, but it doesn't make you high. He didn't call it CBD at the time. He just said this was a different type of plant, and reluctantly I tried it. I had never tried marijuana in the past. I'm from the Bronx, and marijuana, quote unquote, really conjured up images of, dropouts and kids that would hang out behind the bleachers and smoking weed. And I was pre-med, I had my eye on the prize, and I really didn't experiment with it much. So when he said this little bottle is marijuana and it can help you, my eyeballs practically came out of my head. But I had no choice. I had no choice but to try it. I wore a back brace all the time. I could barely stand, and I tried it over the weekend when I wasn't working. And to my surprise, it was the only thing that worked for me. After years of trying different things as a teenager, all the way as a young adult, this little bottle of tincture worked. And I dedicated my career, if my integrative practice, to learning as much as I could about medical cannabis. And now I treat both children and adults in New York.
And New York, speaking of New York, that is how we found you. We have a regular gathering happening in New York City, and I believe the first contact we had was inviting you to come speak at that. And that was the beginning of us being connected. We both, I believe, just feel so strongly about the education piece, you educating your patients and us educating our audience. So thank you for that story. I actually did feature you on hercannalife.com with your story, and we talk about our personal stories and what brought us to cannabis in the introduction of our book. Well, let's get on to our main topic, which is cannabis, but also cannabis and sex. So first, again, before I proceed, a reminder, I'm not a medical professional. Dr. Junella Chin is, but nothing we say today is medical advice. We're just here sharing anecdotes, sharing personal experiences, and in the case of June, she's sharing her knowledge and expertise, but this is not meant for you personally to diagnose you or to recommend something for you. Just having to get that disclaimer out of the way. The first thing that I think those of you who are not as familiar with cannabis should know is that there are many different compounds within the cannabis plant that I like to say it's almost like a superfood. As a plant, cannabis is very rich in compounds that are present in many different plants, but not as abundant as they are in cannabis. So a couple of terms that we want to introduce you to first. Cannabinoids. They're actually called phytocannabinoids in the cannabis plant, and these are molecules, and you know some of these cannabinoids. You may not know they're actually called cannabinoids, but THC is a cannabinoid. That is what gives us that altered mental state or the psychotropic effect. CBD is another cannabinoid. CBN is a cannabinoid you may not even have heard of yet, but it has a sedating effect. If you have too much CBN, it is possibly going to cause that feeling of paranoia that you might get. And CBN is often produced when you don't store your cannabis well and it becomes dried out and old. It becomes higher in CBN. So there are over 100 cannabinoids in cannabis. Now, your body also produces natural cannabinoids, and it doesn't mean that you've got cannabis inside your body if you've never, ever consumed cannabis before. But these molecules were discovered by the scientists who were researching cannabis, so that's why they're called cannabinoids. And if you are depleted in your internal system that is made up of these natural cannabinoids, this is what scientists and researchers are beginning to think is causing a lot of disease and sickness. So June, is there anything that you wanted to add about cannabinoids?
Yes. In particular, I wanted to talk about the endocannabinoid system and how it relates to cannabinoids, because a lot of my patients don't realize that our body has this family, this group of it, this endocannabinoid system of rich in receptors and enzymes. And this is a galaxy of receptor system that's located in the brain and the central nervous system, your connective tissue, your glands, your immune cells, your organs. And this is why the cannabinoids if if you're reading up on it, seems to be so beneficial for so many different symptoms and diseases. It almost seems like it can work for everything, but the reason why it works well is because these receptors, these galaxy of receptors, are all over our body.
Well, that is definitely a really important piece. And in fact, in a few moments, we'll go into a little bit more in depth about the endocannabinoid system. I also wanted to make sure we mention another term, another compound within cannabis, which are terpenes. And terpenes help determine the smells and the taste and the color in plants, in fruits and vegetables. It's not just something in cannabis, but cannabis happens to have a lot, hundreds of terpenes. And many of these terpenes are things that you would recognize. So for example, you can see in the diagram pine. So conifers have pinene. Well, so does cannabis. Citrus fruit has limonene. Well, so does cannabis. And lavender has something called linalool, which can be very relaxing. Well, so does cannabis. Myrcene is contained in mangoes, for example, and it's also in cannabis. So I think people who aren't familiar with the cannabis plant and who are thinking, how in the world, just sort of like you said, June, how in the world can this plant do so many things for our bodies? Part of it is because it's so incredibly dense and rich with compounds, many more compounds that are also found in other plants, but in numbers that are just pretty amazing. And so speaking about that endocannabinoid system that you were talking about a moment ago, the way I like to explain it is the endocannabinoid system is like other systems in our body. So we have our digestive system, we have our respiratory system, our nervous system, our reproductive system. Well, the endocannabinoid system was really identified in 1989 and 1990 as a system that lays over all other systems, that lays over our organs, that's present in our tissues, and it has these receptors. So you were talking about the receptors. There are two that have been identified and named. There's actually several that have been identified and named, but the ones we know the most about so far, CB1 and CB2. These are really important receptors. And I believe it's the CB1 that's through our nervous system and more prevalent in our body, where CB2 is more prevalent in our immune system. And so these cannabinoids that we just talked about are connecting to, are binding to the receptors in our bodies. And by the way, they're not the only thing that binds to these receptors. June, in our book, we were talking about these receptors being some kind of protein, and I should have jotted this down because now I don't remember, and how you were saying that medicines, the pharmaceuticals that we use also address, act in the same way. So cannabis acts like pharmaceuticals. Could you really briefly explain that part?
Right. So the CB receptors that you're talking about, the cannabis receptors, is really the largest receptor in our brain. And these receptors are called G protein coupled receptors, or GPCR
Right.
for short.
Yes.
And the relationship that you mentioned between the GPCRs and the cannabis receptors and pharmaceutical medications that we take every day. This is blood pressure medications, diabetes, asthma medication that you take for migraines, thyroid medications. 60% of our pharmaceutical medications act on G protein coupled receptors. So if you think about the cannabis receptors as being the largest G protein coupled receptor in the brain, you can understand why the phytocannabinoids, the plant-based cannabinoids, work so well in our body.
Got it. Well, it's a little bit of a science lesson, and I know that you're all here to hear about sex. So we just had to talk about some of this first for those of you who aren't familiar with why cannabis works with the human body. And these are some of the pieces of information that help put that puzzle together. But let's get on with sex. So I'm not a sex expert, and I am so glad that I have a doctor on board here. But let's just quickly talk about what happens with sex, and then we can start to draw connections between what happens when you use cannabis before and during sex. So sex is this process. It's a very complex process. And for women in particular, it's a very mind and mental sort of oriented process, not just physical. So sex means that your senses are aroused, you get excited, there's lubrication that happens because obviously hormones are flowing, and hopefully there's lubrication. Some of us know what that means. Blood flows to your erogenous zones, so that blood flow is really important for the sensations and the experiences that happen before and during sex. And then that hormonal release, and then the climax, for women, rhythmic contractions. And these are just all physical changes because our body goes through these different changes before and during and even after sex. So that's part of the experience. The next part is the mind. For us, for as women, I'm sure there's men on the line. Hi, you're getting some insight into women. Sex is very much a mental thing. And I was talking earlier before we actually got started and recording about you have to feel and good about yourself and think positively about yourself to even begin to enjoy a sexual experience. And you, as women, we seek more of an emotional connection. Men tend to connect visually. And we need time to get relaxed. We need time to get aroused. And we can lose the mood immediately. I mean, literally in the middle of everything. Something could happen, something could be said, and gone. It just stops. It just turns off. It's like a switch. So our brains are really, really important when it comes to sex and sexual arousal. So cannabis and sex. This is a hot topic. I want to talk a little bit with you, June, about how cannabis can help, given the other things that we've said that that I just finished saying that sex is all about, the physical and the sort of mental. How does cannabis enhance or help women in particular in terms of sex?
Sure. So the one thing that you mentioned that's a really important thing is that cannabis does decrease anxiety and decrease stress. And when your body is relaxed, your libido is enhanced, and your physical sensations are enhanced, your guard is let down. And this is because cannabis works on GABA receptors in the brain. And GABA tells your body to relax, you're not, rushing to a meeting, you're not in a fight or flight response anymore. So just that alone, cannabis helps you get into the mood.
Well, that is a really, really good start. I think another piece of it, which I can tell you some of the women on the Elementa team, I will not name names, but we know who we are. There's pain associated with sex after a certain age, dryness, and then thinning walls, thinning vaginal walls, and there's pain. I mean, we're talking serious, excruciating pain, not just even discomfort. And there's an analgesic effect that THC has in particular, and an inflammation reduction effect that CBD, as a cannabinoid CBD, has, which I think also can prove pretty helpful. Is that correct, June?
Yes. So if you're experiencing, vaginal dryness or thinning of the labia, the skin around the vaginal canal, sex can be quite painful. Also, with certain pelvic issues, endometriosis, adhesions, maybe C-section scarring can also cause pain in the pelvic region And cannabis can really, really help alleviate the pain by decreasing the inflammation. But also when you are relaxed and your increase in female libido, you will actually produce a little bit more lubrication as well, as you had mentioned. But this is also very tied into estrogen, which we can talk about later. But estrogen and THC, part of the cannabis plant, is linked. There's a crosstalk between the estrogen and the THC, and it influences libido.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, actually, if you could just elaborate a little bit more on the connection of estrogen and THC, that would be great.
Oh, sure. So, so again, in low doses, cannabis causes an increase in female libido. But if you notice, if you take too high of a dose, it will have the opposite effect, and it can actually create a little bit of increase in anxiety, and it's because of the estrogen. So, estrogen levels is a major contributor to female sex drive. And there's this link, there's this crosstalk between estrogen and THC. So if you have very high doses of THC, it actually will interfere with the estrogen and make you less interested in sex. So for the best results, you want to opt for a little bit of a lower THC strain, which is about 14% or less.
Oh, interesting. All right. I'm taking notes. Excellent. Excellent. Everybody take notes. So I think when we are talking about cannabis and sex, there are so many ways for us to take in cannabis. And particularly when you're talking about a 14% or less strain, we have to start reading labels. We have to start really figuring out what is the product that would work for us. So the next few minutes, I want us to talk about the different intake methods that are really ideal for sex. And in talking about that, we'll also be talking about the kinds of products. We're not necessarily going to mention brands per se, unless that happens to come up, but it's really about the idea of how you take it in will determine the kind of product you purchase and that you use. So there's smoking, there's vaping, there's edibles, tinctures, there's oral intake. I always take anything that you take in orally that's not food or drink. I would call it oral intake or an ingestible versus an edible. And then there's topicals. So let's delve a little bit into this, because in the talking about the way we take it in, we'll learn a lot more about everything from dosing to application. So starting with smoking and vaping. Well, or we could say smoking versus vaping. But I do know that when you inhale into your lungs, it's a faster effect, correct, June? That would
Yes,
it would
it's much faster.
be faster.
30 seconds. To 10 minutes.
30 seconds to 10 minutes. Okay, pretty darn fast. And one of the really important things to note about this is the difference between smoking and vaping. So I'll just quickly define that, and then I'll ask you a couple of more questions, June. So smoking is when you combust, when you burn the plant matter, and you're burning it in a tool of some kind. It could be a joint, which is rolled in paper. So you're also burning paper and inhaling paper, burnt paper. It could be in a pipe where you possibly are using a lighter. So you're also inhaling butane. You can see kind of where this is going in my mind, that vaping is a little bit different, where you're warming the plant matter or you're warming the concentrated version of cannabis. So it might be an oil, for example, and you are inhaling the vapor, which will have less, hopefully, contaminants. It has to also, you have to take in whether or not that plant is, how it's grown, if there's still pesticides or other trace chemicals on it. So rather than going into really which one is better, both of them are inhaling. So what would be the pros besides fast acting of either smoking or vaping before a sexual encounter?
Really, it's the timing. So the smoking or vaping gives you, 10 minutes. So it really, if you're, if there's foreplay involved, if you're in the mood, you don't have to wait for an edible to kick in, which can be a couple of hours. The smoking or vaping, you know that's going to be 30 seconds to 10 minutes because it goes through the membranes very quickly into your brain. And it's a 90% bioavailability. So also you can adjust dosing very easily through the smoking or vaping machinery as well.
So you feel it right away or pretty darn quickly. And then if you're not quite feeling enough, you could try a little bit more. But you also, as you said earlier, have to be very careful that you don't overdo it because it could have a counter effect that you wouldn't want. And then about how long does it last if you are smoking and vaping? How long do the benefits or does the feeling last?
Usually about 2 hours. The average person, it'll last about 2 hours. But of course, you know, you don't want to do it for the first time when you're going to be intimate. You might want to experiment a little bit on your own first so that you know how much, you know, what is your limit.
Yeah, I think that would be true for any way that you might consume cannabis. If you have never consumed before, consuming and then trying to have sex is probably not the right formula. It's really finding out what works for you, what works well for you, how you act and react when you are under the influence, even just a little bit. And I like the idea of taking in just a little. That's usually our advice for anything is start low, go slow. And also the idea of micro dosing, taking in the smaller amounts. So really just a small amount can provide that relaxation that could set things off on the right foot. So edibles, you did mention that edibles take a bit longer for them to go through your body and process and feel any effects. I do know, obviously, it has to go through your digestive system, and then it's processed by your liver. So there's a lot of other machinations going on. But what would be some of the pros of using an edible form of some sort of food of some kind or a drink, for example, versus smoking or vaping?
Some people just enjoy the food with it. You know, if it's dark chocolate or a brownie, sometimes it might be a gummy. So just the fun of having an edible and maybe taking your time. So when it kicks in 30 minutes to an hour, you'll really be ready and your libido will peak.
And then how long does it last? How long would an edible last versus the smoking and vaping?
Edibles can last 4 to 6 hours because it depends on your liver metabolism. So again, you want to try this beforehand so you know what to expect and how long you'll feel the effects of the cannabis.
Got it. All right, well, let's move on to tinctures. So tinctures, for those of you who don't really know what a tincture is or have never taken a tincture, it's a concentrated liquid form of cannabis. Now, tinctures traditionally have been made in alcohol or glycerin, so they're in an alcohol or glycerin base. But these days, you are probably more familiar with what's contained cannabis that's infused into coconut oil, which is a really good idea in terms of absorption because cannabis is fat soluble and coconut oil is fatty. So it does help with absorption. And also with a tincture, if anyone's used an alcohol-based tincture, you know that when you stick it in your mouth, it can burn. But a coconut-based tincture does not burn. And putting it into your mouth does have a different way of processing the cannabis in your body. So June, how long would a tincture take, and what does it do in your mouth? I mean, why is it like putting it and holding it in your mouth? How does that benefit you?
So a tincture doesn't take as long as an edible, but still is not as fast as a vaporizer or smoking form. The tincture goes through the mucosal membrane, through the salivary gland. So you would put it either between your gums and your lip or under your tongue and hold it there for 30 seconds. So I would say on average 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes the sublingual tinctures are faster acting, a spray, for example. But you definitely have to experiment and know what your optimal dose is beforehand. Some patients would love to use tinctures if they don't want to inhale anything or if they don't want to swallow a pill.
Well, speaking of pills, that was the next one. Well, it's not just pills. There are other forms of cannabis now, especially in the legal states where companies are just trying to come up with new products and products that are familiar to us. So a pill or a capsule or a breath strip, a dissolvable tablet that you put sublingually under your tongue, even oral spray. You mentioned oral spray. So these technically aren't edibles, but they are things that you bring into your mouth, and some of them you keep in your mouth, so it would have more of the effect of a tincture, and some of them you swallow, which then I would guess takes much longer to process through your body. Is that correct, June?
Yes, it does take longer to process through the body, but then the oral pills and capsules will last maybe 6 to 8 hours even, so even a little bit longer. So if you're looking for something that is sort of an extended time release, an oral intake formula tablet would be perfect.
Okay, interesting. And as I go through this, I keep thinking as well, I'm gonna have a little recipe at the end, not a cooking recipe, but a combination of the things that you would want to do. And in a way, it's combining a few of these different forms of intake. We'll get there in a moment. But topicals. Topicals are anything that you put onto the surface of your skin in any part of your body. So the topical, it can absorb only so much, typically if you put it on most of your body. But if you put a topical vaginally, it has a different effect. Can you explain what that is and why that is, June?
So if you're putting a topical vaginally, it's giving you a localized anti-inflammatory relief, a very soothing relief. So for women that have painful, painful intercourse, maybe lack of lubrication, or again, the mucous membrane, the skin is thinning and a little bit more friable. When you're applying it topically in the area, it can really have a lot of localized relief.
And besides that, though, I believe it can also increase some blood flow, and blood flow is
Correct.
very instrumental, particularly if anybody knows sort of the science and the mechanics behind an orgasm. It is blood flow and release. So having more blood flowing is a useful and helpful thing. The analgesic effect can be useful and helpful. And when we say a topical, and especially a vaginal topical, it actually could be an oil, a salve, ointment, a gel, a cream, even a spray. In fact, here where I live in Alaska, there are several companies that have come out with sprays. And in order to get these intimate product sprays approved and licensed to be sold in the dispensaries, or as we call them here, retail shops, they had to be approved as edibles. So therefore, these sprays are both oral sprays and vaginal sprays for intimate moments. So I think there's really the gamut of the type of consistency or the type of product that you could potentially use vaginally. And I actually had a question for you, June. Could you use a coconut-based tincture that typically you would take in your mouth? Could you use that vaginally, or are you really supposed to be looking for products specifically made as an intimate product?
It's much more cost effective if you use something that's specifically made, because oftentimes they're combined with technology like liposomal or nanotechnology where it's easily absorbed through the skin, and those sublingual tinctures just might not be formulated the same way as topicals. And also I do want to caution that you should pay attention to the CBD and THC ratio of the topicals. Let's say, for instance, some topicals are just for muscular pain and they might be higher in THC. If you're using them in the vaginal area, your vaginal area can be completely numb, in which case will get in the way of sex. So you want to use things that are formulated, usually formulated for enhancing sexual experience.
Well, that's a really good point. And I also want to point out that often these products have other ingredients and other herbs, for example, herbs that might be well known as sexual enhancement herbs. And reading the label, especially if you're applying it vaginally, is going to be incredibly important because, for example, there is a product out there that is meant for women and sexual wellness, and it has all these fantastic herbs in it. It is very, very effective, but it was tested on women who still have their periods. And as a menopausal woman, I tried it, and it actually reintroduced a lot of menopausal symptoms. I began to get night sweats again, and sleeplessness and agitation, all from using this product that had other herbs that were not good for me as a menopausal woman. So knowing your life stage and knowing what the other ingredients are in addition to the cannabis, I think is just as important. So let's get on to this recipe I had alluded to. Really, when it boils down to it, there are so many factors that makes for good sex. Part of it is just taking good care of yourself, getting a good night's sleep, eating well, eating right, and getting exercise in, and feeling that those wonderful endorphins that we get from physical activity, that can really make a difference in how we feel about ourselves. Getting regular checkups, so making sure that we have good sexual health in general, and practicing safe sex is incredibly important. Another piece of it is the relaxation part. And so, as June was saying, cannabis can really pretty quickly put you in a more relaxed state. Too much can have a counter effect, or it could numb you. I didn't even realize that about the whole numbing idea. That does not sound very exciting. And cannabis can also be stimulating. It can reduce pain. And CBD can reduce inflammation. CBD lubricants can sort of do both. They can lubricate and also reduce that inflammation and that sensation of immediate pain. So there's a lot of things that go into having good sex. It's not just all about cannabis, but hopefully you've heard some things that you didn't know before that will open your eyes to what these products could potentially do for you. So the last piece of it is we talked about the endocannabinoid system. By nourishing your body with not just THC, but really CBD and all of the different cannabinoids found in cannabis, by finding products that don't necessarily get you high, but just provide a supplement to your endocannabinoid system, is a really smart way of just taking care of yourself. And again, when you're in good health, when you're in good mental and physical health, it makes sex a lot easier to enjoy. So anything else you wanted to add before we open up to questions, June?
I just wanted to add, when you had mentioned replenishing your endocannabinoid system or nourishing your endocannabinoid system, when women are in menopause, when women have endometriosis and pelvic pain or chronic pain, there is a deficiency in their own endocannabinoid system. You're producing less natural anandamide. And so using a supplement, a CBD oil supplement, a cannabis supplement, fills in that gap for you. And that's why you get an overall sense of well-being.
And I want to just, for those of you who don't know what anandamide is, it is what scientists call our bliss molecule. And it's something that is stimulated during exercise, it's stimulated during sex, and it's also nourished and I guess stimulated through cannabis as well. So cannabis does activate our anandamide, our bliss molecule. Did I say that right, June?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, excellent. Well, it is time for questions. And I know there's got to be a bunch of questions. I can see a lot of people are talking, and we're ready to answer at anything that we can in the time we have remaining. I will pause 5 minutes before the end of this webinar, close to the top of the hour, to do our giveaway and let you know what else we'll be sending to you as gifts. So, Erica, I am bringing you back online, and I think we're supposed to go back on video, aren't we?
That would be fantastic if you both can
All
turn
right.
your videos on and your microphone.
Okay, let's see.
Awesome.
Uh,
Fantastic. Oh, you're almost there. There you
I'm
go.
almost there.
Nice work.
And then, there we go.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we have some fantastic questions. Everybody wants so much more information. This could be a 4-day marathon webinar with the questions and the information that everybody is really hungry for. So I'm really excited about your Q&A. Are you ladies ready for some questions?
Well, we are so ready.
Let's
Go
do
for it. Go for it. Everyone's
Okay.
chomping at the bit here.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's see. What effects can my THC vaginal topical have on my partner? Will they get high or feel anything?
All right, June. I'm going to let you feel that. I'm showing that you're muted. I hope you're not muted. Are you muted?
Yes.
There you go.
So topicals don't usually create euphoric effects. But you just never know. There is a small percentage of patients might feel, again, increase in blood supply, a sort of a rush, and that might interfere a little bit and make them nervous. So you can always experiment. Just do a little patch test, like you would do with new cosmetics or skincare. But it's the THC that you're using in your vaginal area should not affect your partner.
Okay. There we go.
Sounds good. So a lot of the ladies are looking for more information about rectal suppositories. You know, how they work, how they enhance sex, what will they do for them? If you can elaborate there.
Okay, June. I'm leaving this to you, June.
I'm here.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Okay.
So rectal suppositories and vaginal suppositories act in the same way. The medicine is absorbed in the mucosal membrane. Some patients might find it's just easier to insert either in the vaginal area or the rectal area. And then it also depends on pain. Sometimes I have patients that have pelvic pain that does stem from the rectum. Maybe there is a digestive issue, and some patients have scar tissue in the rectum from chronic constipation or chronic diarrhea, and that can create pain in the rectal area as well. Sometimes it could just be plain old scar tissue and adhesions. Maybe something scarring from a past trauma, from a past surgery, from childbirth even. I know for me, that whole area was in terrible pain for months after childbirth, and this is where some suppository can be quite helpful and help you ease back into a healthy sexual life.
So I have a question. Can you get high? Do you feel like head high if you're taking a suppository vaginally or rectally?
No, not usually. So you don't. I actually have sometimes patients will do higher doses because they need more CBD, more THC for the inflammation and the pain, and they don't feel euphoric effects at all. It's very, very rare that I have patients feel the high or feel altered or sedated. That's the beauty of doing something as a suppository.
Okay, interesting. Another question, Erica?
I'm actually trying to decide. Let's see. There was a question about the, oh, it just moved. Okay. About the edibles slideshow, about CBD can counteract too high a dose of THC. Can you talk more about that? She said she never heard of it or thought of it.
Oh, okay. Well, I know a little bit about this part, that if you get too high, if you have too much THC and you're just feeling really uncomfortable, just taking especially a CBD tincture under the tongue, CBD counteracts. So it's interesting because CBD works with THC and then it also works kind of against THC. So it can modulate that high. and a lot of this I learned from writing the book with June, but also there's other things besides CBD that can help, especially if you don't have CBD on hand, that could help quickly modulate and moderate that high. June, why don't you tell us about a few of those things?
That's correct. Exactly. So, so we mentioned the receptors you have in your body. When there's low amount of CBD, the THC will attach to those receptors, those binding sites immediately. But if there's more CBD present, so if you feel like you've taken too much THC, which is again the portion of the plant that makes you feel high, and you take CBD, the CBD will occupy those receptors first, so that it makes the THC binding more difficult. So there's a physiological reason why the CBD modulates the effects of the THC. So always have on hand a bottle of high CBD as an antidote.
Well, there's also terpenes, certain terpenes, and I recall that it's pepper. Pepper has something that can help quickly reduce a high. So chewing on some peppercorn, for example, could interfere with that same sort of effect. So there is something that you have in your spice rack right now that if you were to feel uncomfortably high, you didn't have CBD as a tincture or any kind of way of taking in CBD. Pepper could be helpful as well. Who knew?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I see another question here, actually. Are there any products or delivery methods that can increase the intensity of an orgasm? It seems to me that THC is helpful. So a topical can actually affect what's happening before and during orgasm. So I think that that could help with the intensity. Is there anything that you would add to that? And I don't know if they're looking for exact brands, but there are some brands out there that are very, very specific to this.
I think a vaporizer would be the most immediate. If it will relax your body so much that it intensifies the orgasm and it makes you feel like it's a much bigger, fuller experience. So, you know, sharing the vaporizer in microdosing, of course, with your partner can definitely increase the intensity of the orgasm.
Would that also modify the feeling for a man then?
Yes.
So create intensity and sort of an intense feeling. Okay, interesting.
And it also can work on men who have premature ejaculation because it actually relaxes them a little bit. So that can also help intensify their orgasm as well.
Good to know. Somebody else mentioned that fresh squeezed lemon juice can help bring you down as well. It's limonene, so that's another terpene that, if you just bite into a lemon or squeeze a little lemon juice into your mouth, that limonene can also, if you're too high, reduce that. But if you're looking for the intensity and the effect and the intensity of it, vaporizing and topicals, and I would think also, vaporizing at the beginning for quickly getting into the mood, topicals that can, I believe reading the label, it says effects within 20 to 30 minutes for the topical to absorb and to start having its effect. So maybe staggering a few of these different methods could also be helpful. Another question?
Okay.
Erica, do you have another one lined up?
I sure do. So there are lots of kind of the repeated theme asking about specific topical products for vaginal dryness, and talking about CBD lube and how we use it, how it's processed by the body, so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, I do have a couple of brand names. So as I mentioned, women on the Elementa team have tried all the products that we recommend and have tried some of these products as well, although there is one that has just been received and has not yet been tried. But there is a product called Privy Peach, which is a CBD. They have a CBD-based intimate lubricant. So it is a lubricant that contains CBD to have that anti-inflammatory effect, a very soothing effect. Be really, really careful with any kind of topical or anything that you use vaginally, because if you are also using condoms, it can have a counter effect. I believe there's a product, and now I will tell you that none of us have tried, called Velvet Swing, which says that it is safe to use with condoms. So this is really critical for you to pay attention to. Another product just recently received is called Silk, S-Y-L-K, made from, and I think I'm saying this right, kiwi vine extract, and it's a product that's been used in Australia, New Zealand, and I even think the UK for several decades for women for lubricating with much success. That one does not have CBD in it, but having the right lubricant and then also having some kind of topical CBD or topical THC with a good lubricant, I think is a pretty winning combination. June, anything to add on that?
No, I think you covered everything. That's wonderful. Very complete.
So also understand that there are products that are to be used vaginally, but they're not lubricating. They're really for the effects. So sometimes you have to use a spray for the effects, but if it doesn't offer lubrication and lubrication is an issue for you, combining it with something that's lubricating. But then I'm wondering if you get a CBD-based lubricant, but then use a THC-based spray, are we getting a counteractive effect there, June?
No, you're not. And also, I do want to note that you don't have to use it when you're about to have sex. I mean, if you're using these products on your own, it will help heal the area. It will help decrease inflammation, bring sensation. So you do want to use this more regularly before sex even.
Yeah, when I was starting to enter menopause, my own doctor had said to start just simply using coconut oil on a daily basis as a more natural, soothing lubricant. And now that you can get CBD infused coconut oil, it just sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's see how we are on time. Yeah, we're getting down. We can take one more question, and then I just want to make sure we close out with the last couple of slides so everyone knows what they'll be receiving via email.
So I'm going to say the last question is pretty important because we want to be super responsible. The last question is, are you going to cover cannabis and consent? Just curious.
That's an excellent question. Mm-hmm. And I think the quick way to respond to it, and that's really a much bigger and important issue, but I would say the quick way to respond to that is when you are using cannabis, it can impair judgment. It can make you so relaxed and in the moment where you may not be fully aware, particularly if you overdo it. And like any substance that you take where it alters your brain, so alcohol, cannabis, or anything that alters your brain and potentially your judgment and thinking. You just really need to be careful to have the conversations beforehand with your partner about consent and to make sure that this is a very mutual experience. It's a complex issue. We all know that. Whenever you involve any kind of mind-altering enhancement, it becomes a little bit more complex than it regularly is. So just be very careful and have these conversations in advance. June, anything you would add to that?
Yes, absolutely. I think having a open, honest discussion, a few discussions with your partner before experimenting would be the best thing. Communication is key.
It really is. It really is. And then going back to what you said at the beginning, knowing your dose, knowing how you react, because if you have never tried that product before or that amount before, and if it makes you paranoid or makes you not feel in control of yourself, that becomes a situation where you do need to put the brakes on. So just be very careful. And on the flip side of this, I just wanted to also mention that you don't have to have a partner to enjoy the effects of THC or CBD. So we didn't really talk a lot about that, but self-pleasure and just sort of taking care of yourself is another aspect of good sexual health, and that cannabis can play a very positive role in that as well, as can CBD.
Very good. Thanks.
So I'm going to return now. We're going to shut off our video, and I have just a few more slides again to let you know who the winner is. And here we go. Let's see. Also, hopefully we've picked the winner. Have we picked the winner, Erica?
We sure have. The winner is Nicole H.
Okay, Nicole H. If your name is Nicole, your last name starts with an H, we are going to get in touch with you. Just so you know, if you are based in Canada, Nicole H., we cannot ship the tea to you, but you will receive the stimulating vibrator called Vibe from Vibrant. So thank you, Vibrant, for this incredible gift. And Giovanna, thank you for the tea. And again, if you're in Canada, we can't ship you the tea, but you will get the other, and the tea will go to somebody else, another lucky winner. So you will receive via email tomorrow our list of 10 favorite intimate products. These are THC products, CBD products, all of which we've tried, except for the ones that we noted we haven't tried yet. But these are sort of proven to be very helpful to those of us who have done the testing. And you'll also receive a free ebook from us called 10 Things You Always Wanted to Know About Cannabis, but were afraid to ask. That is something for those of you particularly who are still trying to familiarize yourself with cannabis. It's quite handy. If you want to continue the conversation with us, you can join one of our closed Facebook groups. You can find them at elementa.com/groups. They are state by state, and there is also one for Canada. Right now it covers all of Canada, but we'll just start breaking it out by province as we grow. Gatherings, if you're interested in attending an in-person gathering where women literally sit in a circle or sit in a very comfortable, intimate space and have these open conversations with experts and learn about quality products, elementa.com/gatherings, and of course, social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest at Elementa Woman. And now, save the date for March. The March topic is cannabinoids, the keys to cannabis wellness. We will go into many more cannabinoids and explain to you what they do, how they react and act in your body, and what you can expect from them. So when you go to the dispensary or when you're purchasing a product, you know what to ask for. Emma Chasen, the co-founder of Eminent Consulting, is going to be our expert. So please claim your seat. We will be sending you a link so you can reserve your spot. There is limited seating here, so we want to make sure you can get in. And we are having webinars each month, and we'll soon be having more than one per month. And this particular one will be brought to you by Highland Pantry and Kaliva. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Excellent questions. We're going to save the transcript so we can see what other questions were asked that we hadn't gotten around to answering, so we can publish a blog post where we can address those topics. This is a really important topic for all of us. Be healthy. Be happy, take good care of yourself, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.